An old black veteran sits quietly on a park bench reading. Moments later, police arrive, alerted by an anonymous call claiming he's a threat. A canine unit is released, but what happens next leaves everyone speechless. The dog halts, refuses to attack, and instead, if stories like this matter to you, hit like and subscribe now, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. Liberty Park had always been Elias Walker's sanctuary, a quiet expanse of green in the middle of a town that had changed far more than he had over the years. The oak trees stood taller now, their roots stretching beneath benches that had seen decades of lovers, loners, and lost souls alike. The gravel path still crunched underfoot the same way it had when he first moved here after the war. At 74, Elias preferred familiar places, familiar patterns. Routine was comforting. For 8 years, that routine had included Bruno. Bruno wasn't just a dog, he was a companion, a listener, a fellow traveler through the quieter seasons of life. A 14-year-old Labrador with a gray muzzle and a soulful gaze, Bruno had walked every path of Liberty Park alongside Elias. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, they were there. Elias with his weathered Marine Corps cap pulled low, and Bruno with his gentle, measured gait. Today, though, Bruno was home. His age had caught up with him swiftly this past week. A failing heart, the vet had said. Elias had spent the morning by his side, stroking that familiar fur, whispering words that Bruno could barely hear anymore. When he'd finally left the house, Elias felt the weight of the leash in his pocket. Habit, muscle memory. The park felt different already. Without Bruno's steady presence beside him, the path seemed wider, emptier. He walked slower than usual, not out of fatigue but out of reluctance. The space beside him, always occupied by a loyal shadow, was now an aching void. The June sun filtered through leaves, dappling the benches along the path. Children's laughter drifted from the playground nearby, mingling with the hum of cicadas. Elias chose his usual bench beneath a sprawling oak, the one near the pond where Bruno always paused to drink. Sitting down, he reached into his worn canvas bag and pulled out a book, For Whom the Bell Tolls. The cover was creased and faded, pages softened by time and countless readings. He opened it to where a faded ticket stub marked his place and began to read. But today the words felt heavy, uninviting. His gaze drifted from the page to the pond, watching the slow ripple of water stirred by a passing breeze. His fingers absently stroked the spine of the book, but his mind was elsewhere. He could still feel Bruno's warmth beside him, hear the soft huff of his breath, the occasional thump of a tail against the bench leg. The emptiness was palpable. He closed the book, resting it on his lap, and leaned back against the bench. The sun was warm on his face, but it couldn't quite reach the chill inside him. Across the path, a pair of teenagers skated by, laughing, oblivious. A jogger passed, earbuds in, lost in her own world. Life went on, indifferent to one man's quiet grief. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the scents of grass, distant flowers, and the faint metallic tang of the pond. He thought of the war not in vivid flashes as he once had, but in soft-edged memories that surfaced unbidden, of the young men who hadn't made it home, of the ones who had but were never quite the same, of the dogs they'd worked with, whose loyalty had outlasted human frailty. Bruno had been his link to those days, a living reminder of bonds forged in fire and sustained in peace. Now, even that link was fraying. A shadow passed over his face, drawing him back to the present. A small boy stood a few feet away, staring wide-eyed at the old Marine. "Where's your dog?" the boy asked, innocence cutting through Elias's solitude. Elias managed a small smile, voice roughened by disuse. "He's resting today," he replied gently. The boy nodded solemnly, then ran off to join his friends. Elias watched him go, the question lingering in the air long after the child had disappeared. Where was his dog? At home? Struggling to breathe, to hold on a little longer. A sigh escaped Elias. He picked up his book again, not to read but to occupy his hands. The afternoon stretched ahead, long and uncertain. The park offered no answers, only the comfort of routine and the solace of silence. But today, even that felt thinner. Nearby, a police cruiser rolled slowly along the park's edge, unnoticed by Elias. The officers inside scanned the area, radios crackling softly. Another day, another shift. Elias remained oblivious, His world narrowed to the weight of memory and the aching absence beside him. The oak leaves whispered overhead. A breeze stirred the pages of his book, and so he sat, an old man in a sun-dappled park, waiting. For what? He wasn't sure. Perhaps for the day to pass, perhaps for Bruno to rally, perhaps for the courage to face tomorrow alone. Liberty Park had always been a sanctuary. Today it felt like a place suspended in time, holding its breath. And Elias too held his breath, unaware that the sanctuary would soon become the stage for a moment that would ripple far beyond its quiet bounds. The hum of static broke through the relative quiet of the dispatch room. All units, be advised. Possible suspicious individual reported near the playground at Liberty Park. Caller reports a black male, late 60s or 70s, seated alone, lingering for an extended period. Units nearby, please check and confirm. The message, terse and routine in tone, bounced off the walls of the mobile command van parked discreetly near the park's maintenance entrance. Inside, Sergeant Victor Kane leaned forward, elbows on the small fold-out desk, eyes narrowing as he processed the information. The words black male and near the playground hung in the air with unspoken weight. Kane, 37 years old with a clean-shaven jaw and an angular face that seemed perpetually tense, felt his pulse quicken. The past few months had not been kind to him professionally. A failed sting operation, an internal reprimand over use of force protocol, and a growing file of citizen complaints had left him on unstable ground. This call, as minor as it sounded, might offer a sliver of redemption, or at least a way to prove his initiative. Nearby, K9 Unit 3 was completing a scent trail drill along the outer walking path. Laura Bennett, the handler, had just called Rex off a successful track, her voice calm and encouraging despite the heat shimmering in the afternoon air. Kane stood abruptly, grabbing his radio. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Kane, we're in proximity. I'll take point on this one, have K9 Unit 3 ready to assist." He turned to Laura without waiting for a response. "Bennett, leash up Rex, you're coming with me." Laura glanced at him, brow furrowing slightly. "Sir, we're mid-drill, Rex is still cooling down." Kane's tone sharpened. "That wasn't a request, suit up and move." Years of experience told Laura it wasn't the time to argue, though something about Kane's eagerness unsettled her. She clipped Rex's lead to his tactical harness, giving the dog a reassuring feel. She commanded softly, and Rex responded with practiced precision. As the pair moved toward the playground area, Kane briefed Laura in clipped phrases. "Anonymous tip, elderly black male, park bench by the playground. Could be nothing, could be something, we handle this. By the book, visual ID, non-confrontational at first. Be ready to deploy Rex if needed." Laura nodded, but her gut churned. The park was teeming with families this time of day. A misstep here could spiral fast. She adjusted her grip on Rex's lead, scanning the area ahead. Liberty Park's playground sat nestled among the trees, a popular spot with colorful equipment and shaded benches for parents. Laura's eyes quickly found the described figure, a solitary man seated on a weathered bench beneath a sprawling oak, a book resting in his lap. The scene looked anything but threatening. The man appeared engrossed in his reading, oblivious to the subtle tightening of the net around him. Kane, however, was already reading the situation through a different lens. His gaze flicked to the children nearby, to the mothers chatting along the fence line, to the man's worn Marine Corps cap, an ironic detail that only seemed to harden Kane's resolve. "That's our guy," he muttered. "Position to the right, he'll approach first. Stay alert." Laura swallowed her protest. Something about this felt off, but protocol dictated her role. Rex sensed her tension, ears twitching as they moved into position. From her vantage point, Laura could see the man clearly now. Elderly, yes, but composed. No signs of intoxication, no erratic behavior. A book in hand, posture relaxed, gaze occasionally lifting to the pond beyond. It was a scene of solitude, not suspicion. Kane's stride lengthened as he closed the distance, shoulders squared. Laura maintained a parallel path, keeping Rex at heel but ready. A pair of joggers slowed as they noticed the approaching officers, whispers trailing in their wake. The air seemed to tighten as Kane neared the bench. He keyed his radio briefly. "Unit 5 on scene, visual on subject, conducting approach." Laura caught the subtle shift in Rex's body, a readiness born of training, not aggression. She exhaled slowly, centering herself. This should be a routine check, nothing more. Yet beneath the scripted motions of law enforcement, a volatile current simmered. Kane halted a few feet from the bench, voice clipped but loud enough to carry. "Sir, I need you to look up and speak with me." The man looked up, blinking as if surfacing from a distant thought. His gaze was calm, steady. "Afternoon, officer, is there a problem?" The tone was courteous, tinged with curiosity rather than defiance. Kane's fingers tightened on his belt. "He've had a report of suspicious behavior near the playground. I need to ask you a few questions." A flicker of confusion crossed the man's face. "Suspicious? I'm just reading, this is my usual spot." Laura watched the exchange, tension coiling in her stomach. Everything about the man's demeanor screamed harmless, yet Kane pressed on. "May I see some identification?" The request hung awkwardly in the air. The man complied slowly, reaching for a worn leather wallet with deliberate care. "Name's Elias Walker, Marine Corps veteran. Been coming here for years." He handed over an ID card. Kane studied it briefly, jaw working. The pieces didn't fit the narrative he wanted to build. Laura could almost see the frustration flicker behind his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Walker. We'll need to verify a few details. Please remain." Laura's radio crackled softly. Another unit chimed in, noting that the tipster had been anonymous and untraceable. No corroboration, no context. Laura keyed her mic discreetly. "Subject compliant. No visible threat. Request further instructions." Dispatch acknowledged, but no escalation was advised. Standard check only. Yet Kane's posture remained rigid, his gaze flicking toward Laura and Rex. A silent signal passed, a readiness for action that Laura couldn't reconcile with what she was seeing. "Keep Rex ready," Kane said under his breath. Laura hesitated. "Sir, he's showing no threat indicators. This may not warrant." Kane cut her off with a sharp gesture. "You'll decide that. Stay alert." Across the playground, more parents were noticing the scene. Phones appeared in hands. A subtle shift in atmosphere began, a collective awareness that something was unfolding. Laura's grip on Rex's lead tightened, heart hammering. She glanced at Elias, who remained composed but watchful, eyes flicking between the officers. The weight of unseen forces pressed down on the scene, heavy with implications beyond a simple ID check. Rex's ears twitched again. Laura whispered softly to him, grounding them both. "Easy, boy. Stay with me." Yet in her core, she sensed the balance was tipping. What had begun as routine was veering toward uncertainty, driven not by facts but by something more dangerous: perception, ambition, and the fragile veneer of control that could shatter in an instant. Laura's pulse thudded in her ears as she maintained her stance, one hand firm on Rex's lead, the other lightly resting on her utility belt. The atmosphere around the bench had shifted perceptibly, a subtle tightening of air that Laura had come to recognize in her years on the force. Not a threat from the man before them, but from the unchecked momentum of the situation itself. Elias Walker remained seated, eyes steady beneath the brim of his faded Marine Corps cap, the ID card still resting on his lap where Kane had left it after a cursory glance. His hands were folded loosely over the worn book in his lap, the pages now fluttering slightly in the afternoon breeze. Laura's gaze flicked between Elias and her sergeant. Victor Kane stood rigid a few feet ahead, lips pressed into a thin line, jaw tight. He tapped his radio with agitated fingers, waiting for a follow-up from dispatch that was slow to come. The lack of further information only seemed to deepen his resolve. Laura knew that look. She'd seen it in training rooms and tense after-action reviews. A man clinging to control in a situation that no longer aligned with his expectations. Without turning his head, Kane spoke low into his mic. "You're proceeding to control and contain the subject. Potential risk still present." Laura blinked, her stomach tightening. The phrasing was deliberate, planting the seed of escalation in the comm logs. She shifted her stance slightly, leaning closer to Rex. The dog's body was relaxed but alert, ears swiveling to catch every nuance of the unfolding tension. His deep brown eyes flicked from Elias to Laura, attuned not to the man on the bench, but to the subtle changes in his handler's posture and breath. Then Kane's voice, sharp and clipped, cut across the brief moment of stillness. "Bennett, prep Rex, be ready to deploy." The command landed like a punch. Laura's breath caught. "Sir," she began carefully, "subject is compliant. No threatening behavior. Rex is not signaling aggression. Kane's eyes snapped to her, cold and hard. That wasn't a suggestion. Prep him now. We're not going to stand here and second-guess a potential risk while kids are playing 30 feet away. Laura swallowed hard. Protocol dictated that a canine deployment in a public space, especially around civilians, required clear articulation of threat indicators, none of which were present here. But protocol also demanded a chain of command, and Kane held the reins in this moment. The decision wasn't hers to override. Still, every instinct in her screamed against it. Her grip tightened slightly on Rex's lead. "Yes, sir," she said, voice taut. Kneeling briefly beside Rex, she whispered, "Focus, boy. Stay with me." The Malinois watched her intently. Pale, low, muscles coiled but not tense. They sensed the discord in her tone, the subtle tremor beneath the words. Laura rose, eyes flicking once more to Elias, who met her gaze calmly. There was no fear there, only a patient resignation, as if he had witnessed too many moments like this to be surprised by another. Kane stepped forward, shoulders squared, hand hovering near his sidearm though it remained holstered. His voice was louder now, projecting authority for the benefit of the gathering onlookers. "Mr. Walker, I need you to place your hands on your head and remain seated. Do not move unless instructed." Laura's heart sank. The escalation was unnecessary, unwarranted. She could see the ripple of unease spread through the small crowd of parents and bystanders now watching openly from the playground fence. Phones were recording, their lenses capturing every nuance of the interaction. Elias complied without hesitation, moving with deliberate calm, his fingers interlaced atop his head, elbows flaring slightly. The Marine discipline was unmistakable, a quiet dignity in every motion. "I would appreciate it if you'd consider that," he said evenly, voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest bystanders. Kane ignored the words, eyes narrowing. He tapped his mic again, preparing for control, K9 ready on my command. Laura's throat was dry. She risked a glance at Rex, who remained steady but now shifted subtly closer to her leg, reading the rising tension without fully understanding his source. His training told him to respond to clear cues of aggression or danger, none of which the elderly man before him presented. But the tension from his handler and the authoritative edge in Kane's voice were cues of a different kind. Laura exhaled slowly through her nose, forcing calm into her frame. She had to be precise now. Any miscue, any misplaced signal to Rex could trigger a chain of events she couldn't reverse. "Rex, stay," she murmured, voice firm. The dog's ears flicked once in acknowledgement. Kane's stance shifted. Laura recognized the subtle weight transfer, the signal of an imminent command. "Deploy on my..." He didn't finish the sentence. From the edge of her vision, Laura saw a uniformed officer approaching briskly, phone pressed to his ear. His expression was tense, eyes darting between Kane and the seated veteran. A brief murmur into his radio, then a sharp glance toward Kane. "Sergeant, dispatch is still attempting to verify the tip. No additional reports, no corroboration yet." Kane's mouth tightened. "We're proceeding under caution until cleared," he snapped. Laura's pulse hammered in her temples. Her training told her to de-escalate, to advise her superior of the risks inherent in proceeding without clear threat indicators, especially in a public setting. But Kane's body language brooked no dissent. Around them, the circle of onlookers had thickened. The hum of conversation, the discreet clicks of camera shutters, the tension-laden air. It all pressed in like a vice. Elias sat unmoving, gaze forward, the picture of controlled patience. Laura met his eyes again, willing a silent apology through the gulf of protocol and command. Rex shifted fractionally, muscles rippling beneath his sleek coat. Laura tightened her grip imperceptibly. Whatever came next, she would control her partner with every ounce of precision she possessed. Kane drew a breath, shoulders rolling back. His next command hung unspoken in the charged air between them, poised on the edge of action. Laura's breath came shallow as she held Rex at her side, her gaze flicking again to the man on the bench, then to Kane, whose posture remained unnervingly rigid. Everything about this scene contradicted the escalating commands echoing in her ear. Elias Walker had not moved except to comply fully with the orders already given. His hands remained atop his head, his demeanor steady, composed. There was no sign of concealed weapons, no erratic gestures, no verbal escalation. In Laura's training, this was the textbook image of a compliant subject, a man who posed no active threat to himself or to others. Yet the weight of Kane's earlier words pressed down upon her. "Prep Rex, be ready to deploy." Now Kane stood a half step ahead, shoulders squared, voice clipped as he keyed his radio again. "Unit 5 to dispatch." No further confirmation on the report, but proceeding with controlled contact. "K9 unit on standby." The phrasing hit Laura like a slap. Controlled contact suggested an engagement, one that would be difficult to walk back in the eyes of both the public and the chain of command. She glanced again at the growing cluster of bystanders, many of whom now openly filmed the unfolding scene. Every choice made here would be dissected later, frame by frame. But the real audience Laura worried about was the one seated quietly before them. The man whose only apparent offense had been existing in a public space, alone, with a book. Summoning what resolve she could, Laura spoke softly into her subject remains compliant. No aggressive signals. Advising caution. Her words were met with static, then Kane's voice. Sharp with impatience. "Negative, Bennett. Proceed as ordered. This is now a controlled exercise. Good opportunity for Rex to reinforce public handling under pressure." Exercise. He was framing this as a training opportunity, using a real person as the live variable. It was not only poor judgment, it was dangerous. Rex was highly trained, yes, but his instincts were honed for real threats. Pushing him into a forced scenario risked unpredictable outcomes, especially with an innocent civilian at the center. She looked at Kane, trying to mask the tightening in her throat. "Sir, Rex is trained for engagement on clear threat indicators. Deploying under current conditions could confuse his read on situational parameters." Kane's eyes cut to her, cold. "We follow through. It's good conditioning for him under stress. I've given the order. Stand by for go." Laura's hands tightened on Rex's lead involuntarily. She crouched briefly beside the Malinois, voice low and steady. "Stay with me, boy. Focus. This is controlled, no aggression unless true threat." Rex's ears flicked once, muscles taut beneath her hand. He was reading her tension now, absorbing the conflict she struggled to contain. The dog's intelligence was keen, his bond with Laura strong enough to sense that something was amiss. Yet he would follow her lead. That was the trust they had built over years of partnership. Standing again, Laura risked another glance at Elias, who had remained motionless throughout the tense exchange. His eyes met hers briefly, calm and unflinching. There was understanding in that gaze, not of submission but of recognition. He saw what was happening perhaps better than anyone else present. He had lived through other moments of tension born not of action but of assumption. The seconds stretched unbearably thin. Then Kane's voice, flat and final, sliced through the brittle air. "Go." The word reverberated in Laura's gut. There was no room left to argue without direct insubordination. Protocol demanded compliance now, even as every fiber of her being recoiled from what was about to unfold. Her duty bound her hand. Laura's voice was steel as she released the lead. "Rex, forward. Controlled approach. Assess." Laura shadowed him closely, ready to call off or intervene at the first sign of misread signals. Around them, the tension of the crowd crackled audibly now. Gasps, murmured disbelief, the rustle of shifting bodies. Phones tracked every movement. Children's voices had fallen silent, the bright clamor of the playground muted beneath the heavy atmosphere of the scene. Elias watched the approaching dog with remarkable composure. He did not flinch, did not move. His gaze remained steady, hands still atop his head. As Rex drew closer, Laura's heart pounded harder. Every training scenario flashed through her mind. Every instance of controlled approach against an actual threat. This was not that. Yet Rex would do as trained, unless overridden by her or by the situation itself. 10 feet. 5. Rex slowed fractionally, nose working faster now, reading the man's scent, his posture, the totality of his presence. There was no adrenaline spike in the air, no pheromone surge of fear or aggression from the subject. The signals were inconsistent with threat conditioning. Laura sensed it in Rex's shifting weight, in the subtle lift of his head as he neared the final approach zone. Her hand hovered near the call-off signal, breath caught. Kane stood rigid to the side, eyes locked on the unfolding moment, unaware or uncaring of the deeper layers at play in the canine's read of the scene. Laura's voice was in her throat, ready to issue the next command, her instincts screaming to reclaim control of the situation before it tipped beyond recall. And in that suspended instant, as Rex reached the invisible threshold between training and reality, something unexpected began to unfold. Rex's approach slowed as he closed the final few feet to the bench where Elias remained seated, his hands still resting atop his head, body composed, gaze unwavering. Laura's pulse thundered in her ears, her every instinct alive with tension. She tracked Rex's every movement, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of a misread signal or unintended escalation. Kane's presence loomed nearby, his rigid stance betraying a hunger for control rather than caution. The air around the scene crackled with unspoken energy, a collective breath held by the gathering crowd whose phones now captured every heartbeat of the moment. Rex's nose worked rapidly, inhaling deeply as he processed the layers of scent before him. The old man's scent was an anomaly. No spike of cortisol, no chemical markers of fear or aggression that Rex had been conditioned to associate with threat response. Instead, there was something else. Something familiar and complex that tugged at the edges of the dog's finely tuned instincts. At a distance of barely 3 feet, Rex halted. The suddenness of it struck Laura like a physical blow. One moment the dog had been in fluid motion, the next he stood frozen, muscles taut but unmoving, head tilted fractionally to the side. His ears flicked forward, then back, processing a signal no human present could perceive. Laura's breath caught. "Rex, stand by," she whispered urgently, her voice pitched low. But the dog remained motionless, eyes locked on Elias's face with an intensity that went beyond training. Something had shifted in the space between them, an invisible current that neither Kane nor the watching crowd could grasp. Elias, for his part, held perfectly still, yet in his eyes there was a flicker, a spark of recognition, of understanding born from years spent in a different kind of battlefield. Slowly, with a care born of deep experience, Elias lowered his hands slightly, keeping them visible and non-hedging. His gaze met Rex's, not with fear, but with a calm familiarity that seemed to ripple outward. The dog responded with a subtle shift of posture, weight distributing evenly, tail lowering, head tilting again as if trying to place a memory long buried. And then Elias spoke, not in English but in a low, measured tone that resonated with layered command. "Platz," he said softly, the German word for down. It was not shouted, not barked with force, but delivered with the quiet authority of someone who had once spoken to dogs in a place where life depended on obedience born of trust, not fear. Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. Rex responded instantly. Without hesitation, the Malinois lowered himself gracefully into a prone position, his chest against the ground, head lifted slightly, eyes never leaving Elias. Then, with a soft, almost tentative movement, Rex crept forward the final few inches, body low and controlled. He pressed himself gently against Elias's legs, tail still, posture one of deference and trust rather than readiness to strike. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Phones trembled in recording hands. Laura's heart slammed against her ribs as she fought to process what she was witnessing. Kane's voice hissed across her earpiece. "What the hell is going on? Call him off." But Laura's training, her instincts, held her fast. Rex was not disobeying, he was responding to something deeper, a thread of memory that had surfaced in this moment of unlikely convergence. She keyed her mic. Rex is responding to subject's verbal command. No aggression. Holding position. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Her gaze flicked to Elias, who now spoke again in that same calm German. "Gut, Junge," he murmured. "Good boy." The words resonated with a warmth that carried years of layered meaning. Laura's mind raced. How could this be? The answer hovered just beyond reach, until Elias spoke again, this time in English, voice low but carrying. "Dark trained dogs like him in Fallujah 2004. They remember voices, tones. He knows I'm not a threat." The words landed like a thunderclap in Laura's consciousness. The pieces clicked with sudden clarity. Of course, military canine handlers often trained in German commands. The bond between handler and dog ran deep, built on layers of trust and conditioned response. And for a dog like Rex, whose lineage and training undoubtedly traced back through such programs, the imprint of those early commands could lie dormant for years, ready to surface in an instant of recognition. Laura's breath came faster now, not from fear, but from the dawning awareness of the significance of what had just unfolded. Kane's voice crackled again, angrier now. "Bennett, secure the dog. This is a failure of control." But Laura knew better. This was not failure. This was a moment of profound connection that defied the narrow expectations of command and protocol. Rex had made a choice, guided not by orders barked from a tense superior, but by the quiet authority of a man who spoke the language of loyalty and trust. The watching crowd seemed to sense it too. The murmur of voices swelled with a different energy now, not fear but awe, curiosity, shared understanding that something rare had just transpired. Laura crouched slowly beside Rex, her voice soft but firm. "Good boy, stay," she whispered, her hand resting lightly on his back. Rex remained pressed against Elias's legs, calm and alert, eyes flicking between Laura and the man who had reached him across years and layers of training. Elias looked down at the dog, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth, a smile not of triumph but of quiet gratitude. His voice, when he spoke again, was meant for Laura as much as for the dog. "He's a good one," he said softly. "Smart, knows when not to follow the wrong command." Laura met his gaze, a spark of understanding passing between them. And in that charged moment, with the weight of protocol pressing from one side and the deeper truth of the situation unfolding before her eyes, she faced a choice of her own. The next move would not be written in any manual, nor dictated by the clipped orders still hissing through her earpiece. The shift in the crowd's energy was almost palpable. A murmur rippled outward from the growing cluster of bystanders, voices overlapping in hushed amazement, the occasional gasp rising above the rest. Parents who had instinctively pulled their children away moments earlier now stood transfixed, phones raised high to capture the surreal tableau unfolding before them. Laura remained crouched beside Rex, her hand resting lightly on his back as if anchoring both of them to the reality of the moment. The Malinois pressed gently against Elias's legs, body language calm yet watchful, ears flicking to track the layered sounds around them. His breathing was steady, his gaze flicking briefly to Laura, then back to the man who had so effortlessly reached through layers of conditioning and command to forge a bond built on trust, not threat. Elias sat motionless on the bench, hands still in clear view, the faintest trace of a knowing smile at the corner of his mouth. His eyes, deep with the weight of long experience, met Laura's with a calm that belied the tension saturating the scene. On them, the steady thrum of recording devices layered upon the crackle of the police comms, weaving a tapestry of observation that would soon spill beyond the boundaries of Liberty Park. Laura's earpiece flared to life, Kane's voice now sharp with rising frustration. "Bennett, what the hell are you doing? Secure the dog. This is a direct order." Laura's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed against the demand to pull Rex now, to force him into an aggressive posture against every fiber of his current read on the situation, was not only reckless, it risked shattering the fragile trust Rex had just demonstrated with profound clarity. "Sir," she keyed her mic carefully, voice measured. "Rex is responding appropriately. Subject is compliant. No threat indicators." The reply came instantly, edged with fury. "There is not your call. I want that dog off the ground and ready to engage, now." Laura hesitated, eyes flicking again to the growing crowd. The stakes had just escalated exponentially. Every phone in sight captured not only her movements, but the nuance of Rex's posture, the calm presence of the elderly veteran, and the mounting impatience radiating from Kane. To act rashly now was to invite a public relations disaster, one that could not be contained by after-the-fact reports or carefully worded statements. Kane's voice cut through her hesitation. "I said move, Sergeant." Laura rose slowly from her crouch, maintaining steady eye contact with Rex. Her voice was low, intended only for the dog. "Easy boy, stay with me, this is not wrong." She extended a hand toward Rex's collar, not to pull, but to maintain a connection, a tether of reassurance in the charged air. Then Kane stepped forward abruptly, closing the distance with a gait edged by frustration and authority. His hand reached out, fingers curling toward Rex's harness in a motion that brooked no subtlety. "Get him up, I want him on task." The sudden shift in energy hit Rex like a physical wave. The Malinois' body tensed fractionally beneath Laura's hand. His ears flattened momentarily, eyes narrowing as they tracked the incoming movement. Then, in a flash of instinct honed by years of training layered upon primal intuition, Rex reacted. A deep, resonant growl rumbled from his throat, low and unwavering. His lips peeled back slightly, exposing a flash of white teeth, not in uncontrolled aggression but in a clear and deliberate warning. His body shifted subtly, weight distributing to position himself protectively between Elias and the approaching figure. His gaze locked onto Kane, no longer the neutral read of a working dog awaiting direction, but the sharp, assessing stare of an animal who had made a choice rooted in loyalty and discernment. The crowd's murmurs spiked audibly, gasps and exclamations rippling outward. "He's protecting him," someone whispered loudly enough to carry. Phones tilted to capture the sudden escalation, lenses focusing tightly on the tableau now frozen in a moment of profound tension. Laura's breath caught. Her hand remained steady on Rex's back, but her other hovered near her radio, fingers trembling slightly. To speak now required precision beyond mere words. It required a bridge across the widening chasm between command and conscience. Kane's face flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. His outstretched hand hovered uncertainly mid-air, inches from Rex's protective stance. "Control your damn dog, Bennett," he barked, voice cracking under the weight of public scrutiny now bearing down upon them. Laura met his gaze squarely for the first time, her own voice calm but firm enough to carry. The words hung heavily in the air. Kane's jaw worked furiously, eyes darting to the encircling crowd whose collective gaze had shifted decisively from passive observation to active judgment. Any wrong move now would not be lost to the anonymity of routine policing. It would be dissected across social platforms within minutes. Elias remained still, his voice calm but carrying the resonance of a man who had seen far worse than this. "Your dog knows what's right, officer. You do well to listen." The words, delivered without malice, landed with the weight of truth. Rex's growl eased fractionally, not in surrender but in measured control, a living testament to the bond that had just defied both expectation and command. Laura's fingers tapped her radio, her next words a lifeline thrown into waters now roiling with unseen currents. The silence that followed Rex's growl hung heavy, suspended like a held breath over Liberty Park. Kane stood frozen, caught between the pressure of his authority and the weight of the moment unraveling before him. Laura remained poised, one hand gently resting on Rex, the other near her radio, her breath slow and controlled, anchoring herself to her training. I sat still on the bench, the same calm in his expression now accented with something more. Dignity, maybe, or the quiet resignation of a man who had learned to endure long before this moment. The crowd, once passive, was now a living presence, murmuring louder, leaning forward, some voices demanding explanation, others narrating into their phones with real-time disbelief. A young woman whispered, "That officer's dog just protected the man. This is not okay." Then, from the left edge of the scene, near where an additional patrol had just arrived in response to the call escalation, a voice rang out, clear, surprised, and unmistakably authoritative. "Hold up, Walker." Walker heads turned as Officer Tom Harper, 59 years old, uniform slightly faded and boots worn from years of foot patrols, stepped forward from behind the other officers. His brows were knit in a mixture of confusion and recognition. "That's Elias Walker," he said louder, turning to the others. "He's a Marine. He saved 8 of his unit in Fallujah. I know that man." Laura blinked, instinctively straightening. Even Rex flicked an ear at the shift in energy. The name Fallujah hit the air like a dropped stone into still water. Kane's jaw clenched. "You know him?" Harper nodded, stepping closer, his voice low but firm. "Damn right I do. He's a decorated war veteran. I spoke with him once at a veterans event downtown years ago. That man dragged half his unit out of a collapsed building in Iraq while under mortar fire. He's the real deal." The murmurs in the crowd shifted again, growing louder, sharper. The narrative was changing. What had started as an anonymous call about a suspicious man near a playground was quickly dissolving into a public spectacle with a decorated veteran at its center, and a dog that had refused to obey a command that didn't feel right. Kane's expression tightened as he stepped back slightly, visibly recalibrating his next move. But the tide was already turning. A uniformed tech officer approached, holding a tablet linked to the city's real-time surveillance system. "Sir," she said, directing her comment toward Kane, "I pulled footage from the Liberty Park camera grid for the last hour." She tapped a few times and then held the screen toward him. This path arrived at 1:42 p.m., took the southeast path, sat on this bench, never came within 30 feet of the playground perimeter. There's no record of any unusual movement. The anonymous report is unsupported. Laura looked to the screen, scanning the footage. There it was. Elias walking slowly down the path with his canvas bag slung over one shoulder, sitting peacefully beneath the oak tree, opening his book. No loitering, no suspicious behavior, no proximity to children. Just a man seeking quiet. "We've reviewed the camera at the northwest gate too," the tech continued, her voice steady. "No signs of him making contact with minors or stepping inside the posted child safety zone. Whatever call came in, there's no footage to back it up." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Could be a blind spot." The tech shook her head. "Multiple angles. 3 clear lines of sight. No blind spot within 50 feet of this area." The truth, layered in video, in testimony, and in the dog's behavior, had begun to eclipse the thin authority Kane still clung to. Harper turned toward Kane, his voice low but firm. "We need to back off. This man doesn't deserve this. And this dog just made the right call when we didn't." For a second, no one moved. The moment teetered on a precipice. What would be remembered as a cautionary tale or a quiet collapse into accountability. Rex shifted again, slightly, his gaze now relaxed but still fixed on Elias. Laura placed both hands on her knees and exhaled, finally letting her muscles uncoil. "Sir," she said aloud this time, turning toward Kane, "I recommend we de-escalate and stand down. We've got visual proof, we've got a respected witness, we've got a dog that recognized Anonymous." The crowd began to react now with more clarity. "Let the man go," someone shouted. "But he didn't do anything." "That's a hero," another voice added. Kane's eyes darted across the sea of phones, the circle of watchful eyes, the faces now flushed not with fear but with collective disbelief. The narrative had turned, and for the first time he seemed to feel its weight. Laura's hand drifted down again to Rex, whose body was warm and steady beside her. She could still hear the faint echo of Elias's voice in her mind. That moment of obedience had turned everything. The Malinois had read what no one else in command had dared to consider. A war veteran, a quiet park bench, a book, and a dog, and the kind of calm that only comes from a life lived through storms. And still, Kane's hand hovered near his belt, a pause that refused to acknowledge the gravity of what had already shifted. Victor's jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles beneath his cheek twitched with every breath. The words from Tom Harper, the footage on the tech officer's tablet, the shifting mood of the crowd, none of it registered fully in the storm building behind his eyes. All he could see was a room full of phones raised against him, a subordinate disobeying his direct order, and a dog that had just publicly undermined his authority. The heat rose in his chest, blood pounding in his ears. Without waiting for further instruction, Victor moved, stepping forward with sharp intent toward the bench where Elias remained seated and Rex held his ground. His booted feet struck the pavement hard, each step a pulse of frustration now bleeding into action. "Stand aside," he barked, voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. His hand hovered near his belt again, not at his sidearm this time, but at the tactical leash clipped to his vest. A final bid to seize control of the dog he thought had slipped beyond his grasp. Laura's breath caught as she saw him advancing. Her hand tightened reflexively on Rex's harness, even as she rose from her crouch to intercept. But Victor's momentum was unchecked. "Sir, stop!" Harper's voice rang out, layered with both command and concern. But Victor either didn't hear or didn't care. Then everything seemed to move at once. 2 officers from the recently arrived patrol, young, wide-eyed faces pale with the recognition of a situation unraveling, moved quickly from Victor's flanks. They caught him just as he reached the outer perimeter of Rex's protective stamp. Hands grabbed at his arms, voices low but urgent. "Sergeant, stand down, you need to stand down." "Get off me," Victor hissed, struggling against their grip. His eyes burned with the raw edges of pride and panic. But even as he fought, Rex had already shifted, reading the change in energy with pinpoint precision. The Malinois rose fractionally from his prone position, body low and forward, shoulders tense but not lunging. His deep chest issued another low, unwavering growl, a sound that stopped Victor cold even as his arms strained against the hands holding him back. The dog's head remained angled slightly upward, eyes locked on Victor with an unwavering intensity that made every human present pause. It was not the growl of a dog in rage or fear. It was a warning clear as words. Move 1 inch closer and the response would not be theatrical. Several voices calling out, "He's protecting him, let it go." Laura stepped quickly into the space between Victor's advance and Rex's protective line, her body a shield of both training and instinct. One palm extended toward Victor in a universal signal to halt, the other grounding herself again on Rex's tense frame. "Easy, boy," she murmured. "Good, stay." Her voice was calm, deliberate, each syllable chosen to reinforce control without escalating further. The officers holding Victor tightened their grip slightly, their own expressions caught between duty and dread. Harper moved in beside them, voice low but firm. "Victor, you need to stop, now. You are about to turn this into something none of us can fix." Laura's heart hammered beneath her vest. The proximity of Victor's aggression to both herself and the dog sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. But her training held. She kept her voice steady. "Sir, for the safety of all involved, including yourself, you need to step back." Victor's breathing came hard through flared nostrils, but something in the collective weight of the scene, the fixed stare of the dog, the hands on his arms, the dozens of cameras now locked on his every twitch, finally slowed the reckless momentum that had propelled him forward. He stopped struggling, shoulders heaving, mouth a thin line of fury he dared not unleash further. Harper nodded sharply to the two officers. "Hold him back." Laura exhaled slowly, her hands steady on Rex, whose body remained a coil of readiness, eyes flicking between Victor and Elias but never losing focus. In that thin margin of calm, Laura shifted slightly, her voice dropping to a private tone meant only for Elias. "Sir," she murmured, gaze flicking to his weathered face, "you gave him that command, didn't you? You know how to handle." Elias met her gaze steadily, a faint warmth flickering beneath the steel of his composure. "Yes," he said softly. "I trained dogs like him. Iraq, Fallujah, 2004. We worked with Belgian Malinois just like this one. Same commands, same instincts." Laura's breath caught again, not from surprise now but from the weight of what that meant. It explained everything. The instant connection, the flawless response to the German command, the protective stance now holding the line between chaos and control. Elias continued, voice low but resonant, intention more than force. "He knows I am not a threat, and he knows what a threat looks like." His gaze flicked deliberately toward Victor, whose red-faced frustration still radiated from the grip of his fellow officers. Laura absorbed the words, her respect deepening in that instant. The man before her was not simply a veteran or a subject caught in a dangerous escalation. He was a handler, someone who understood the bond between dog and partner on a level most in the department could only hope to grasp. "I can call him off?" Eyes returning to hers. "That's what you need." Laura shook her head once, subtly. "Not yet," she replied just as softly. "Right now he's reading the room better than anyone." The faintest trace of a smile touched Elias's weathered features, a shared understanding passing between them in the charged space between law and loyalty. Around them, the crowd's murmur grew again, the narrative now shifting irrevocably in the minds of every witness present. Phones captured not just images now, but context. An old Marine calmly commanding a highly trained police dog, a sergeant losing control of his own authority, and an officer standing firm between what was right and what had been ordered. Laura's grip remained steady, her own next move balancing on a knife's edge. Above all, she knew one thing with crystalline clarity. Whatever came next would define the moment not just for those present, but for every pair of eyes now watching from behind countless screens beyond the park. The moment Victor stopped resisting, the grip of the officers holding him eased, though their bodies remained tense with readiness. Laura kept her hand firm on Rex, whose low growl had faded into a deep, chest-level hum of alertness. Elias remained seated, composed, eyes steady beneath the brim of his faded Marine cap. Around them, the crowd swelled with voices louder now, their phones held higher, Screens heltered toward the standoff as narrations mixed with indignation. "You were about to sick that dog on a war hero," one voice said, clearly captured on multiple live streams. "That man trained these dogs. Look at him, he's calm and their officers losing it." Another voice added, "This needs to go viral. Everyone needs to see what's happening here." As if on cue, notifications began pinging across devices in the crowd. Streams launched on multiple platforms. Facebook Live, Instagram, hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Justice for Elias K9 knew better. Liberty Park incident. Laura caught snippets as voices overlapped. They said he was suspicious near kids. Look, the cameras already proved he wasn't even near the playground. He's a Marine, saved lives in Fallujah, and they were about to drag him like a criminal. The narrative was no longer within police control. The raw authenticity of live footage, combined with the deeply human image of Rex choosing to protect Elias rather than follow an unjust command, resonated instantly with viewers beyond Liberty Park. Across town, phones buzzed in cafes, offices, and living rooms as the story spread. Local newsrooms scrambled to verify the incident. Reporters dispatching teams to the park even as the first clips hit social media feeds with viral velocity. Laura remained grounded in the moment, her focus locked on maintaining Rex's calm state and ensuring no further escalation occurred. But a part of her, the part that understood how public opinion could shift faster than any departmental memo, knew that the ripple effects of this day had already begun. Harper, standing now beside Victor, whose face had drained of its earlier fury, spoke quietly into his command needs to get someone down here now. We're going to need leadership on the ground before this turns into a citywide storm. The response came swiftly. Copy that, Chief, en route. ETA 10 minutes. Across the crowd, local journalists began to arrive, microphones and cameras weaving through the sea of spectators. One reporter caught Laura's eye, mouthing silently, "Is that the Marine?" Laura gave a subtle nod, unable to offer more without breaching protocol. The reporter immediately turned to her cameraman. "Go live, we've got a confirmed ID." Meanwhile, within the city's police command center, notifications from public relations officers lit up screens in rapid succession. A social media monitoring dashboard showed the hashtags climbing trends charts at an unprecedented rate. Internal chat threads exploded with directives. Confirm ID of subject. Prepare initial statement, chief requested to address press. At Liberty Park, the arrival of the chief of police, a graying, square-jawed man named Anthony Morales, marked the next shift in tone. Exiting his unmarked cruiser, Morales took in the scene quickly. Victor restrained by his peers, Harper standing firm, Laura kneeling calmly beside Rex and Elias, and a crowd now thick with both citizens and media. Morales approached with deliberate steps, voice calm but authoritative. "Let's lower this temperature. Sergeant Kane, step aside." The officers holding Victor released him. He straightened stiffly, face flushed, but remained silent under Morales's hard gaze. Morales then turned to Elias. "Sir, on behalf of the Liberty Police Department, I extend my deepest apologies. This situation should not have unfolded this way. You have my word we will address this properly." Elias inclined his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate that, Chief, but words aren't enough. Make sure it doesn't happen again." Morales nodded solemnly. "Understood." Turning, he faced the crowd and the awaiting cameras. A cluster of microphones thrust forward as the press closed in. "Chief Morales, do you have a statement? Why was a Marine treated like a suspect? Has Sergeant Kane been relieved?" Morales held up a hand. "We will address your questions shortly. First, I want to make this clear to everyone. Mr. Elias Walker is a decorated Marine and a respected member of our community." The anonymous report that led to this response was unfounded. Our own camera footage confirms this. "We deeply regret the distress caused to Mr. Walker and to those who witnessed this incident." The chief's words rippled through the crowd, a mixture of approval and lingering outrage surfacing in their responses. Reporters fired questions faster than he could field them. Morales continued, "An internal review is already underway. We are cooperating fully with city oversight to ensure transparency moving forward." Laura remained where she was, her hands still resting on Rex's back, who now had relaxed fractionally but remained alert. Elias's voice reached her again, low enough for only her to hear. Smart move, bringing the chief out here. But this won't just fade away. Laura nodded once, understanding more deeply than she could say. The internet had already ensured that. Clips of Rex's protective stance, Elias's calm control, and Victor's failed attempts to assert dominance had spread to national audiences within minutes. Major news outlets were already picking up the story, framing it as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the instincts of a well-tried dog guided by a human who had earned its trust long ago. Morales shifted focus to the cameras once more. There will be a formal press conference this evening at department headquarters. Full accountability will be pursued. For now, I ask for your patience as we gather all relevant facts. The crowd's energy remained charged, but the presence of the chief had at least stabilized the immediate tension. Laura sensed Rex's breathing slow further beneath her palm, the dog settling into a protective rest beside Elias. The moment of high alert passing without diminishing the bond now forged in full public view. Around them, the livestream comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. K9 Knew Better was now trending nationally. Images of Rex curled at Elias's feet, juxtaposed with footage of Kane's outburst. The world had seen what had transpired. The department's next steps would be scrutinized not just by internal reviewers, but by millions who had witnessed the truth unfold in real time. Harper leaned toward Morales, voice low. We're going to need to handle this carefully. That dog just saved this department from a disaster worse than anyone's ready to admit. Morales nodded, eyes weary. I know, and we owe them both more than an apology. The days that followed the Liberty Park incident unfolded in a swirl of media coverage, department rental reviews, and an outpouring of public sentiment that no one in the Liberty Police Department had fully anticipated. The video clips of Rex protecting Elias circulated relentlessly, picked up by national news outlets and shared across every major social media platform. Editorials praised the dog's instinct and raised hard questions about the department's handling of the event. Hashtag K9 Knew Better remained in the trending lists for days. For Laura, the aftermath was a strange blend of pride, exhaustion, and a profound sense of responsibility. She spent hours in interviews with both internal affairs and public affairs teams, recounting every detail of the encounter. Through it all, her thoughts returned again and again to Rex, whose loyalty and discernment had not only prevented a tragedy, but had, in many ways, restored her own faith in the deeper bond between handler and dog. Meanwhile, Elias found himself at the center of a public wave of support he neither sought nor resisted. Veterans groups rallied behind him, community leaders called for official commendations, and offers to speak at civic events arrived by the hour. Through it all, Elias remained grounded, his focus as always on what truly mattered. And what mattered now, more than the headlines or the accolades, was the remarkable connection that had been rekindled in Liberty Park, that between a man and a dog who had recognized in each other something far deeper than the events of a single afternoon. Quietly, away from cameras and press conferences, Laura approached the department's K9 unit coordinator with a request that surprised few who had followed the incident closely. I want to initiate the process to retire Rex to civilian companionship, she said firmly, and I want him to go to Elias Walker. The coordinator blinked, then nodded slowly. There will be paperwork approvals. This kind of transfer isn't common. I understand. Laura replied. After what happened, it's the right thing to do. The community's behind it. And more importantly, Rex has already made his choice. The paperwork moved faster than anyone expected, buoyed by a flood of public petitions and letters urging the department to honor the unique bond that had emerged so clearly before the world's eyes. The chief himself, in a rare show of personal advocacy, signed off on the retirement with a simple note attached, for loyalty, for service, for trust. The day of the transfer was kept intentionally low profile. No press conference, no cameras, just a quiet meeting at Elias's modest home on the edge of town. Laura arrived with Rex in her cruiser, the Malinois alert but calm, tail wagging softly as they pulled into the driveway. Elias stood waiting on the porch, posture straight, eyes warm beneath the familiar brim of his cap. As Laura opened the back hatch, Rex leapt down with graceful ease, eyes scanning the space before locking onto Elias. No command was needed. The dog trotted forward with deliberate steps, stopping just short of the porch. Elias crouched slowly, extending a hand. Platz, he said softly. Rex lowered himself instantly, eyes shining, tail sweeping the ground once in recognition. Elias's voice held the faintest catch. "Good boy," he murmured. Laura watched the exchange with a lump rising in her throat. She approached quietly, a folder of final paperwork in hand. "He's yours, Sergeant Walker," she said softly, using the title with deliberate respect. "Effective today, full civilian adoption, all medical and care expenses covered by the department. And if you ever need anything, my number's inside." Elias rose, eyes meeting hers with steady gratitude. "Thank you, Officer Bennett. You did right by him." "And by me?" Laura smiled faintly. "He did right by all of us." Word of the transfer spread quickly, the public response overwhelmingly positive. What had begun as a story of near tragedy had transformed into one of redemption, of bonds that transcended uniform and badge. The air was crisp with the scents of budding flowers, the familiar hum of laughter and life returning to its usual cadence. Amid the families and joggers, one familiar figure drew smiles and waves as he moved along the well-worn paths. Elias Walker, Marine veteran, walked slowly with Rex trotting easily at his side. The dog's movements relaxed but attentive. Their passage through the park was met with warmth at every turn. Children pointed excitedly, parents offered quiet nods of respect, and more than one passerby paused to snap a photo or offer a word of thanks. The bond between man and dog was evident in every step they took together. No leash was needed. Rex stayed close by choice, eyes occasionally lifting to Elias as if to check in, to reaffirm the trust between them. A young boy approached shyly, his mother close behind. "Is that the dog from the video?" the boy asked wide-eyed. Elias crouched with a soft smile. "Yes, son, his name is Rex. He's my partner now." Cameras captured the moment, images that quickly joined the growing collection of positive stories circulating across the city and beyond. In one particularly striking shot, shared widely online, Elias and Rex walked beneath the tall oaks of Liberty Park, the Marine's hand resting lightly on the dog's shoulder, both framed by dappled sunlight, a living symbol of loyalty, resilience, and the enduring power of trust. The image came to embody not just the events of that fateful day, but a broader hope for understanding between communities and those sworn to protect them. Underneath the public admiration, for Laura and Elias alike, the true reward was quieter, deeper, a bond forged in the crucible of a single afternoon, now carried forward in every step they would take together. Thanks for reading this far. If the story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with more true-to-life, emotionally grounded narratives like this one. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it Rex's loyalty or Elias's quiet strength? Also, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your location.